Good evening, Crypt Keepers, and welcome to Cryptique, where we discuss all things paranormal, occult, UFO, metaphysical, hidden history, forbidden archaeology, and all things truther. I'm joined, as always, by my podcast partner to the cosmos, Jay. What's up?
I'm doing good, man. It is warm out here, and I am loving this weather. I will take it, and we've got a great guest scheduled for tonight, so I am excited. How about you? How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm prepared to be cold in the middle of the night because I will forget one window somewhere, probably the one in the bathroom or something. And then it's going to get cold because it's been an really atypical 76, 77 degrees here in St. Louis.
Got hot.
Yeah, it was. It was kind of hot. I had to look it up. The hottest it's ever been in February in St. Louis was like 86 degrees back in 1972 or something like that. So we're not record-breaking yet, but we're very unusual.
We're working on it.
Yeah, we're working on it. But you want to tell them what they need to know?
I do. All right, guys. So here's the deal. We put out a ton of free content. We get cool guests. We do shows that we hope you like. And all we ask for is a like, a subscribe, a share, because there is nowhere for us to advertise. If we try to advertise, we are basically looking at like 2 or 3 categories that do not represent us at all, like, entertainment or science or world history or something like. There's just nothing for paranormal, conspiracy, anything like that. So you are the ones that move the needle for us, and we love that about you guys. Please continue to do that. That's what we really, really, really need to keep going. You can find all the socials in the notes. You can let us know what you think at cryptiquepodcast@gmail.com. You can check out our slick designs at cryptiquepodcaststore.com. And if you want to do a one-time donation, we would really appreciate that too. It all helps. You can do that at buymeacoffee.com/cryptiquepi. All right. Tonight, Cryptique is proud to welcome author and researcher John Sandbach. John Sandbach is a highly respected astrology and tarot researcher who's been working professionally in these fields for more than 50 years. He's the visionary behind the Chandra symbols of the 360 degrees of the zodiac system, and he offers private astrology and tarot readings online. He's the author of several books, including The Circular Temple and Astrology, Alchemy, and the Tarot. He lives in Kansas City. His latest book is Soul Journey Through the Tarot, Key to a Complete Spiritual Practice. And I have heard people say tarot, which is how I've always heard it, but then it seems like when I listen to people that actually know what they're talking about, they're saying tarot. How do you say it?
I say tarot.
Okay, good.
Although sometimes I say tarot. Yeah, that's funny you ask, because I do both. Yeah.
Yeah, we know what we're talking about. So
exactly.
Kind of like me with route and root. I switch back and forth.
Or data and data.
Uh-huh.
All right. Well, John, welcome to Cryptique. How are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing very well, actually.
Yeah, it's beautiful weather here in the area. We'll take it for now. And thanks for joining us on a day where everybody should be outside doing something. So we know that you're dedicated to your research when you're willing to sit down with us when it's 77 after it's been 9 out.
Well, I was just outside doing something. I just sat down here, so I've been taking advantage of it.
Good for you. All right. Well, before we get started, can you tell people where you want them to go to get your books?
Oh, yeah. It's on the Walmart website. It's on Amazon website. It's on Barnes and Noble.
Okay.
Yes.
So any of those are fine? You don't have a preference?
No, that's for the Soul Journey Through the Tarot. For my books, well, Amazon has most of them.
Okay.
I would say yes.
Okay, great. All right. Well, getting started, can you tell us about your background and then eventually what initially drew you to tarot?
Yeah, I started into astrology when I was 18 years old.
Hmm.
And it was kind of strange because it was just this compulsion that overcame me. It's like time to learn astrology. And I
Okay.
just kind of went for it. And back then, we're talking about like in 1966,
Hmm.
there was not that many books published on astrology. There was a big book called Books in Print. And I went to a bookstore and they had a copy of that book. And I looked up astrology, and was only about 5 or 6 books.
Hmm.
And so I bought all of them, had them sent to me, and started working on it. And then there's a library in Kansas City called Linda Hall Library, which is one of the biggest science libraries in the world. And I went over there and tried to figure out from whatever I could look up there how to draw up a chart. And at first it was really difficult to understand, and it
I
took me
bet.
forever to figure it out. But I just kept working at it, and I got better and better at doing it until finally I could do one in about 20 minutes.
Wow.
Now it takes me about 2 seconds to do it. You push a button on the computer and there's all the calculations perfect. I love it.
That's cool.
Yeah, so, computers have revolutionized astrology. And then, probably about 5 years after I got started with astrology, I found this book called The Sacred Tarot by C.C. Zane, who had an organization called the Brotherhood of Light in California. And his book on the tarot is great. I just loved it. It made so much sense, and it links astrology to the tarot. So I practically memorized that book. I just read it over and over and over. And then me and this other guy named Ron Ballard, I taught Ron tarot, I taught him astrology, and then we started teaching classes together.
Okay.
And then out of the classes, we developed a something we could send to people, like a home study course on tarot. And we advertised it through the National Enquirer. And so we had people taking that home study course. It was 26 lessons. And then those lessons were put together into a book. And that was published by Aries Press in Chicago. And what people said about the book, generally speaking, was they said, well, it really has a lot of good information and a lot of really interesting information, but it's very poorly structured. And so when Inner Traditions decided to publish the book, they put me, first of all, I went through the book and restructured it.
Okay.
I mean, massively, I restructured it. And then the editor they put me with, she did some more restructuring of it. And she was really good. And so that's the book that got published. And so really, it's not like, I wrote that book a couple of years ago. It was like I started that book practically, 50 years ago.
Wow.
And so then it's almost like a house that fell into ruin and then got rehabbed with extra rooms added on and, things like that. And so it's been in the works for a long time. So
you said you just felt kind of a need to get into it. Was it just one of those interests that grabbed you immediately, or was there?
Yes, and that's in
else?
my chart. I have the technical thing is I have Venus, Mars, in what's called a septile aspect. And then for certain reasons, it stands out tremendously in my chart. And what that does, it makes me like that. Like I'll get this thing of like, it's time to read such and such, or it's time to study this, and a lot of times I can't explain why. I don't know why, but I know that it's like psychically agitating if I don't do it, that I need to do it. I need to follow those inexplicable urges like that. And so the older I've gotten, the more I do that. And so the more mentally balanced I am, because I'm not being driven crazy by my own repression of my psychic urges, kind of thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah, I guess it's a nice thing that it's a constructive urge and not a destructive urge, because we do shows about people that have those too. So it's it's good when it's, positive and
Oh yeah,
constructive. Now,
yeah.
as I said in the email, Ryan and I really know very, very little about tarot. Um,
Hmm.
so it's hard because you know so much and we know so little. Finding a place to meet in the middle might be a little difficult. So we're going to try, if we could just have you do kind of the cliff notes on what tarot is and what it is not, because there's a lot of misconceptions out there about it too, I think.
Oh sure. And when you say a lot of misconceptions, I would underline that.
Okay.
There really is. First of all, there's so many tarot decks. I
Hmm.
mean, there's hundreds of different tarot decks. And then there's a lot of literature on the tarot, a lot of books. I'd have to say a lot of them are confusing
Hmm.
or not very good or not very helpful. Sometimes they have good ideas in them and sometimes not. Um, but the tarot has been used for fortune telling. That
Hmm.
was the main thing, like you ask me a question, I shuffle the cards and I lay them out, and then whatever cards comes up is like giving you an answer.
Sure.
And really, this is like what it's like is the I Ching in China,
Okay.
where they have these way of casting lines, like they randomly find these lines. There's only two types of lines: a broken one and an unbroken one.
Hmm.
The unbroken is just a straight line.
Sure.
The broken one is two lines, side by side. And then so they cast the I Ching and they get 6 lines, and there's 64 possibilities. So there are 64 what they call hexagrams. And then those 6 lines generate a hexagram and they look it up in a book, see
Okay.
what that means, and that answers your question. So
Okay.
really, the I Ching is like the tarot. Um, and the thing is, too, people are always asking me about the history of the tarot. I'm telling you, it's really fragmentary. It's
Okay.
kind of lost in time. Like these cards appear in Italy in the 14th century, and the first known decks of tarot cards, there's not even a full deck, it's just a few cards. And then I think the first full deck was in France in the Middle Ages, called the
Okay.
Marseille deck from the city of Marseille.
Okay.
And it had all the traditional pictures on it. Um, I'm not, a historian.
Sure.
I'm not even a researcher in the tarot. My research is all psychic, traveling on the astral plane, that sort of thing. My being guided by my intuition. I'm not a researcher in the university type sense.
Okay.
Gotcha.
And but I have had some insights and some feelings. And one of them is that, well, first of all, this is not just my feeling, but a lot of people have this. You heard of Kabbalah?
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, so Kabbalah's main book is the Zohar. And the
Okay.
Zohar is a very long book. I used to own a copy of it. It's 22 volumes in length. And the tarot is divided into two parts, two groups of cards. One is called the Major Arcana, and it
Okay.
consists of 22 cards. And the other one is called the Minor Arcana, which consists of 56 cards, making a total of 78 cards. Well, my feeling is that those 22 cards of the Major Arcana go with the 22 volumes of the Zohar.
Okay.
Meaning for each one of those cards, there's a whole book on it.
Mm.
And it's one of the volumes of the Zohar.
Okay. Well, one of
Then,
the things oh, sorry.
I was just going to add that really what the Zohar is an interpretation, an analysis of the first couple of books, first several books of the Bible, starting with Genesis.
Hmm.
I mean, they have pages analyzing the meaning of the first word of Genesis and what it symbolically means. So it's very, very involved. So I'm sorry, what were you going to ask?
I was wanting to get into the symbolism and how you interpret what those symbols mean. Like you were giving the example of the hexagrams and how you would be able to look those up in a book to find what
Oh,
they
yeah.
mean specifically. But before you connected, Jay and I were talking about a friend that I used to have who did tarot readings. And it was fascinating to watch him deal out the cards and interpret what they meant. This card means this, but because it came out this way or it was upside down or whatever, it might mean something different. And then applying it to these people's lives. And I watched him do it dozens of times. And
Yes.
every time the person he was talking to was like, oh my God, that relates back to this experience or this family member or whatever. But
Yes.
I always kind of wondered, is that an intuitive thing, or is it based on your knowledge of the symbolism, or how does that work? Is it study,
I
or
think
is it
the way
kind
it
of
works is, like you learn the tarot and then you learn the meanings of the cards.
Mhm.
And then when you look at a card, if you ask me a question, I look at the card and I rationally, consciously have in my head the meaning. But the more familiar you get with the cards, what starts happening is I can just feel it in my hand. You just turn over a card and it's just this energy there, and I'll just start talking. Things will come out of my mouth.
Mhm.
You know, uh, most people have a trouble with self-confidence. I think everybody's psychic. I think psychic is natural.
Agree.
I know it seems like from what I know about Cryptique, you guys have worked a lot with UFO things
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
extraterrestrials and stuff like that.
Mm.
Well, I think it's interesting that a lot of these extraterrestrials, they don't use their mouth much. They don't talk much.
Right.
But then they'll
Right.
communicate inside people's heads. You know,
Right.
people will feel like they're talking to them when actually it's just ideas occurring in their heads.
Right.
I think that's what the human race is evolving toward.
Okay.
That we all become so intuitive that if I'm with you, I can just kind of look at you and what you're thinking will flow through my head, and then I can flow stuff through your head, and it's just like that, you know.
Yeah. Much more efficient way of communicating for sure.
Yeah. So the tarot is kind of helps people toward that. It brings out and enhances your intuition. It's kind of a support for your intuition. But one of the most wonderful thing that C.C. Zane, that guy that wrote the Sacred Tarot book, said is that when you're looking at those cards, like if I'm looking at cards for you, it's like if I get something that I don't know, it doesn't seem to go along with the actual meaning of the card, say it anyway. That's what's most
Mm.
important is your intuition, not the cards. The cards are tools, they're enhancers. And actually, too, sometimes the cards can answer a question in ways that we're not even aware of it. We don't there's something about it we don't yet understand,
Sure.
you
Sure.
know.
Yeah, I can remember this guy pulling out cards and saying, "Well, this means this, but I'm not sure how this works into what you told me so far." And then they'll like death or something like that, and they'll say, "Oh, I just lost my aunt 3 months
Yeah.
ago, and it's been really hard on all of us, and I didn't tell you that earlier." And yeah, a lot of it he'll say, "Well, I think this relates to this thing that you told me," and then sometimes he'll just be like, "This card usually means this. Make of that what you will."
Yes. Yes. And another thing too is I always feel like if I look at a card and I just really draw a blank, like, what the hell does that mean? Or how does that relate to the situation? This is a wonderful thing because I know then I'm on the I'm on the edge of my learning. I've come to that point where this is something I don't understand. And many times, if I'll meditate on that card or think about it, then it'll come to me, oh, that's how that relates to that.
Right.
Yeah, now I'm
Right.
seeing it, the connection, And then through that, you grow, you learn more.
Right. Almost like most jobs, once you experience some situation, you learn better how to handle it.
Exactly.
Can
That's
you take
exactly
us
right.
can you take us through what one of your readings may look like what someone can expect if they say they want you to do a tarot reading for them?
Well, one thing is I'm going to tend to ask them questions. I really want to know where they're at, what their current challenges in life are. And then it's very important to me that it's interactive. Sometimes people they'll say to me, "Oh, I don't have a question. Just draw some cards for me." You know,
Yeah.
and I'll do that. But ideally, if I do that, then I tell them what I'm getting. I want some kind of response from them. You know, did that make sense to you? Did that ring any bells and whatever? Then it
Right.
becomes interactive, and then sometimes I'll draw more cards because let's say you're asking about your brother, and your brother's having trouble at work, and then so I'll draw cards and ask, why is your brother having trouble at work? And maybe it comes up that the main thing is that he's not getting along with the employer. I might draw more cards and ask, well, why isn't he getting along with the employer? And
Okay.
then always a good question to ask is, what can I do about this? How can
So
I handle this? How can I make this work?
so if
Uh,
someone's doing a reading, can they expect because I always thought that it was like, okay, you go get a reading and they draw 7 cards or
mhm.
4 cards. Is there a like something that you have to do to get a complete reading, or is it something where you might be able to answer their question by pulling 1 card and then the reading's done?
Oftentimes I'll answer a question just by pulling one card. And
Okay.
Mhm.
probably the layout I most used is very simple, is 3 cards. And
Okay.
basically what it is, that first card is the background of the situation.
Okay.
Like maybe what's caused it or what's been in the past concerning it. The middle card is the answer to the question, and it's the present, and it's what's going on now, what to do now. And then the
Okay.
third card is where it's headed, what it's going toward, what the future with it's going to be like. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll just draw one card, and then if I want to know about that past or that future, I'll draw a second and a third card. Like the second card might be the past card, and the third card might be the future card, you know.
Gotcha.
And I tend to work very fast. And also on my website, I do psychic readings. Though in my head, it all blends together. It all flows together. Meaning,
Mhm.
if someone contacts me and they just want a psychic reading, I might 10 minutes into the reading, I might say, "You care if I look at the tarot?" Well, everybody's going to say, "Well, sure, that's fine."
Sure.
So I'll pull
Yeah.
out some cards. If I really get into it, I might say, "When's your birth time? I want to see your chart."
Okay.
So then they give me their time of day, the year, month of day, and their place. I can put that in an astrology program in 2 minutes and push a button. There's their chart. Well, I mean, I've been doing this for like really 57 years, you
Second
know.
Wow.
nature.
So, yeah, just looking at astrology charts, all sorts of things will start coming to me, you know.
Hmm.
So, all these things help each other, So I guess I just use what I have.
So if you were giving someone advice, would you say learn tarot, but also learn astrology and anything else to throw into that mix?
Yeah, right now what I'd be prone to saying is go with tarot. And the reason is, I'm telling you, astrology can be so complicated,
Yeah.
and there's so many different types of it and ways to do it and techniques and stuff like that. I think it just maybe takes a little longer to learn. But if
Yeah.
someone has the with the will to do it and the energy, astrology is great. But another thing about learning the tarot, my tarot is fully astrological, meaning
Okay.
every sign and every planet has a card that goes with it. So if you study tarot, then you automatically are learning the meanings of the planets and the signs, so that then when you go to learn astrology, you already know a lot of astrology through the tarot. So
And you were talking about needing, or maybe not necessarily needing, but wanting the feedback and the engagement from the person you do the reading for.
yes,
Jay and I talk a lot about intention seeming to really matter in a lot of situations.
oh
Just
yeah,
putting out the
it's
intention or an
everything.
expectation. So I would feel like somebody who is skeptical of what you're doing and is purposely trying to hold back would maybe throw a wrench in the reading or at least make it less
Yeah,
effective. Do you think that's true?
yeah. Less than an hour ago, a woman called me for a 15-minute reading, and she said, "There's something going on with my husband's health. I want to know about my husband's health." So I turned cards and I said, "I don't think, I think there's something wrong with his health, but it's like some kind of chronic, long term, low grade thing that's not going to be so much of a problem. And I'm picking up he needs like supplements, vitamins or minerals or something." And she said, "Do you pick up what vitamins and minerals?" Well, at that point, I wasn't getting this from the tarot. I just said he needs magnesium and he needs D, vitamin D. And she started laughing. And she said, "That's exactly what I thought." But she said, "I wasn't going to tell you that because then if you just went along with it, I think you were just getting that from me, you know."
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
so that kind of gave her more confidence in me. But then somebody else could say, "Oh, but John, you were just picking that out of her head." In other words, maybe that wasn't so much his health problem, but she thought that, and so you picked up on that from her.
mm,
I don't think so. I think she's right. He needs vitamin D and he needs magnesium. I just know it. I feel it. Yeah.
Have you ever had a reading, and this kind of goes along with what he was saying? Um, there's just hecklers and trolls for everything out there. Do you
Oh,
get
is there
people?
ever?
Do you get people? And I'm sure you get hate mail. We get hate mail sometimes too. But have you ever had a reading where someone's just been a complete jerk and you're just like, I'm not doing this. Listen, if you're going to
Oh,
treat me like
sure.
this, I'm done.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Not very often. I'll tell you one thing that happened though, because I love it because you guys are open to this kind of thing.
Absolutely.
This is a long time ago. I was doing this reading for this woman, and I was drinking some tea at the time. And I took a sip of tea, and it tasted terrible. It had this terrible taste. And I knew instantly, or I felt instantly, that she was putting out some kind of a vibe that was like this poisonous vibe and this kind of crazy vibe. And I just stood up, went to the kitchen, spit out the tea, and came back and said to her, "I think you don't know me anything for this. I think we're done. I think we just need to stop."
Wow.
You know,
mm. And how did she
that's an
respond to that?
extreme situation. That doesn't happen. That kind of thing doesn't happen very often.
Was her response just that she accepted that, or was she
Oh, I
upset?
think she could tell by my attitude that I was truly done.
Okay.
And so she got up and left. And I don't know to what extent she was aware of what she was doing. I think it could have been just that she was mentally had problems and that there were
Sure.
dark, like negative spirits working through her.
Mm.
Ooh. Have you ever seen something like, and we don't have, I mean, we can go wherever you want. I mean, I want
Yeah.
to get to your book for sure, but I mean, we can go in whatever direction you want. Have you ever had somebody where you're just like, oh my gosh, you need to go seek help from, um, whatever their faith might be or anything like that. Like you've got some darkness attached to you and you got to do something to fix this.
Yes.
Can you tell us that
Yes, and
story?
and one of the things with those situations is that sometimes I feel like, or I intuit, I can be real direct to this person.
Mm-hmm.
Just say it, just like you said it just now.
Mm-hmm.
Other times it might freak the person out,
Yeah.
or they might be in denial about it. So I have to find some kind of diplomatic, sideways way of kind of saying stuff to,
Just massage it in.
yeah, exactly, that sort of thing. And there's a lot of those kind of dark energies floating around. And since we're talking about dark energies, the tarot is like the Ouija board in that it's just a tool.
Mm-hmm.
So you can use a tool, you can use a hammer to build a cabin, or you can use a hammer in your serial killer work.
Right.
Same hammer.
Yeah.
Uh, and so, if you just kind of mess around with the tarot and you don't have any spiritual purpose or intent set, it could draw in dark forces. Sure, it's possible.
That was
Kind of thing to
absolutely one of my questions. Is I kind of wondered if that was going to be a misconception, because I know, this friend, some people would not want him to read for them because
Uh-huh.
they're worried about what can come through. Once you look at the phenomena looks back. For me, it was just, I don't want to know what's coming. Like, I'm
Yes,
happy to be surprised.
right.
But I did wonder, is that a fairly common thing, or is it a misconception that there can be darkness that comes through? So that's interesting to hear
Well,
that you go
there's
into it without intent.
there's
Yeah.
Like a
people
good
that
purpose.
just call it the work of the devil to begin with, that it's
Oh,
it's
yeah, of
devil
course.
stuff.
And
Yeah.
they do the same thing with astrology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a
Yeah.
past life. Yeah, I
Well,
had a
I was
past
just going to
life
say,
where
an
I
astrology
lived
is
in
kind of.
Spain and they came in the middle of the night and stood around my bed and beat me to death. That was a political thing with the Catholic Church about it was time for them to get rid of astrologers, and I was one.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, things like that happen.
Yeah. And I think, unfortunately, astrology probably gets a bad name from like social media. I think a lot of people
Oh,
try to
sure.
blame their sign or whatever
Yes.
their chart for their behavior. I had a girl who worked with me who'd say, "Oh, I'm a this. I can't work with her because she's a that," or I was late because of this reason, or I dropped this like expensive thing in the back room because of
Right.
some
Using
goofy
astrology as
thing.
a big excuse for things.
Yeah, and it's like she, for the most part, was joking, but I feel like there are people out there who are actually serious, who kind of want to live up to the characteristics that are typical of that sign.
Yeah. I think of that sort of thing as using astrology to enable neurosis.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting
You
it.
know,
Yeah, I like that.
uh, and it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't help anything. I
Hmm.
think of astrology as something you can use to uh, help a person benefit their life, make things better, because then they understand themselves better and they understand what their talents are and what their assets are. So, and another thing, of course, I don't know if you want to get into this, but I thought you might be interested in it. Something in my book that the publisher was a little bit dubious at first about publishing, like, why are you putting this in this book? Is that on many traditional tarot decks, they have Hebrew letters. Like the Hebrew alphabet has 22 letters. And so each one of those letters corresponds to one of the cards.
Right.
And the Kabbalists believe that before God created anything, that God created the alphabet. And the alphabet was like these glowing thought forms. And that
Hmm.
then the letters of the alphabet created everything else.
Hmm.
That's what actually created everything. So they take a real heavily mystical approach to the alphabet and to letters and whatever. So in my book, there's this guy named Dr. John Weilgart. He's deceased now, but I met him when he was alive. He came down to Kansas City. He taught some workshops connected with our astrology classes and whatever. And He was a professor of linguistics and psychology. He had
Wow.
he had 2 PhDs, one in each of those subjects, and he invented a language called Aui.
Huh.
And so Aui is extremely simple and easy to learn. And
Right up my alley.
yes, and he wanted this to be like a world language, you know? Well,
Sure.
what a lot of people don't know is because they kind of ignored it, they played like it wasn't really happening, is that Dr. Weilgart believed that an extraterrestrial or one or more came down and gave him this language, showed him how it worked, how to use it. And these extraterrestrials told him that this language was spoken on millions of planets in this and other galaxies, that it was kind of
Wow.
like an intergalactic language. And so each one of Dr. Weilgart's letters, just like the Hebrew letters, it corresponds.
Okay.
So I use these in my book to amplify the meanings and the understandings of the cards. And it's
Okay.
very interesting how that interfaces, how that all works together. And I think Dr. Weilgart was brilliant, and I believe what he said about it. My intuition tells me that this really, I don't know if they actually came down to him in a physical form. They might have just,
Sure.
like I get the feeling that the uh, crop circles in England, I think those are done from afar a lot of times. Although they have, footage of them being actually done with a little thing that looks like a laser beam.
Yeah.
Uh, so,
Well, that's really interesting. I have never heard of that. That's going to be something I'm definitely going to look into.
Yeah, same here, because there was a period in time in the 1800s, late 1800s, where a couple sort of universal languages were created, like
yeah,
Esperanto, which was
uh-huh,
originally called something else. I forget what, but
yeah.
uh,
I've always been
the
interested in
whole
this.
idea of, yeah, the idea of that is to be really simple in terms of conjugation and your different verbs and
Exactly.
tenses and all that. But also, it's, I think, very much Latin based. So I'd be interested to look up this language
Right.
that you just talked about and see, if that's,
In
if it's Latin based,
Aui,
you could probably make the argument that it's more earth based, but if it's foreign but easy to learn, that would
yes,
lend credibility to the idea that it came from somewhere else,
right.
which I would assume it did.
So in Aui, um, every letter has a meaning. So if I say the word F, which is Fu, F means this. It always means this. In any word you see F, it means this. And the U, means human. So F means this human. It's the word for I. If I
Oh,
say B always means together. So BU, B, means together human, means you.
That's pretty
I,
cool.
E, the I sound, which is E, means sound, and B always means together. So Ebe means sound together. So Ebe actually means and sound together. So if I say Fu Ibu, that means you and I.
yeah, I can believe that's an
And
intergalactic
so
language.
then if something's written in Naui, you can look at a word and you know what each one of the letters means. You can almost figure out what the word means just by looking at the letters. That's what makes it so simple.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm I bring up Star Trek a lot on this because I'm a little bit of a Trekkie,
Yes.
but this is reminding me of there's an episode. I was just watching some kind of behind the scenes stuff about the show, and there's an episode where there's a race of aliens called the Binars, and they always work in pairs. They're humanoid, but they're a little, most alien races in that show are just human actors with stuff on their heads.
Yeah.
These guys are a little bit different, and they're enhanced with technology, and they've found that communicating verbally is too slow. So they have this extremely truncated abbreviated language where they're almost like beeping back and forth at each other like a fax machine would.
Yeah.
And it's almost like an extreme version of what you're talking about, where each letter carries enough meaning to sort of stand on its own.
Yes.
So I can buy that this is a step towards that. Or maybe a really fluent speaker of it would just sound like they were beeping at us.
Right. I
That's
love that
awesome.
idea. That's wonderful.
So we've kind of covered, the, I guess, myths about tarot, that they're, it's devil, it's evil, it's this or that. It's really in, just doing a little bit of research. It's a reflection of you. It's not necessarily like you're not. It doesn't come from somewhere else and come to you. It comes from you and reflects you to yourself. Is that right?
That sounds like a quote from my book.
Oh, okay, great.
That's exactly right. The tarot is like a mirror.
Hmm.
And I'm really into the myth of the Medusa.
Okay.
And you know how when Medusa looked at someone, she turned them into stone.
Hmm.
And so Medusa is actually like a mirror. And so what happens is it shows you things you don't want to see.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so when you don't want to see it, you go into denial, which is like turning into stone.
Ah,
Yeah.
Okay.
So, no, it's definitely the tarot is a mirror, and it helps you to see yourself, and that's what
Yeah.
we're here to do. I believe that's what we're all here to do.
Yeah, I think that that's a really useful aspect of it too, to lay things out like that. And it's one of the reasons I recommended my fiance start meditating, a couple years ago. It's like when you spend all your time reading, watching TV, playing games, whatever it is, we're all kind of keeping ourselves occupied a lot.
Exactly.
But I find that if you just sit and kind of reflect on yourself and the things that are happening, your problems sort of, I don't know, solutions kind of present themselves, or you start to realize in this picture that I'm seeing, this thing that I was worried about is not really a big deal at all.
Right.
And maybe something else needs my attention right now, and I could improve
Right.
my life that way.
Right. Or as Sadhguru says, one nice thing about humanity, we really know exactly where our problems are. They're all between our ears.
for sure.
Yeah.
That's a great quote. Where do you see? I mean, we talked about possibly evolving where we use mind speak, and that's probably pretty far off in the future. But
Yeah.
where do you see tarot fitting in the future? Is it something? I mean, like I know if I go to a library, I can find a decent amount of books on tarot. If I go to a bookstore and I go to like the paranormal section or whatever, there's tons of decks out there. And I don't know if it's just because the decks are expensive that they sell with it and it's a bigger profit and that's why they have so many of them, or if it's just way more popular than I thought. Is it something that you see growing and more people using in the future?
Yes, I do. And I'll tell you, just to be frank, you want to know what I think the main reason that they decided to publish my book on the tarot?
Why is that?
It's a fad right now.
Oh,
Wow.
well,
That was I'd love to think it was because they thought it was a really good book. But I think the way they think is, well, we try to publish really good books, but on the other hand, we're a company
mhm.
and we
Yeah.
have to make money,
Yeah.
So,
Kind of like when, certain young adult series take off, then suddenly you see a lot of them. When you walk into your local bookstore, there's a ton trying to replicate that, maybe.
exactly, just exactly right. Yeah, and I really think humanity's going to make it through this, what we're going through. But it looks like it's going to be really rough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's a tidal wave of wrongness that's sweeping over everything,
Yeah.
kind of thing. But we are gonna turn it around, I really think.
Yeah, I personally feel like we're, as a society, going through sort of a crucible.
Oh yeah,
And once we come out, I think we'll be a lot better off for it. I mean, there's a lot of difficult experiences people go through individually that makes them stronger or more resilient. And hopefully,
yeah,
as a society or a culture, we can do the same thing.
yes. I think we're eventually. My chiropractor, who I think is a very enlightened woman, she said it'll take about 100 years, but she says after about 100 years, I think we're going to actually truly start taking care of each other.
It'd be nice. It's funny
Yeah,
that you mentioned a chiropractor. I love going to the chiropractor too, and people think that they're like evil fake doctors and stuff. It's like, really? You've never been to a chiropractor if you think
yeah.
that, because you
My
walk out and you're
chiropractor
an
is
inch taller and
brilliant.
feel great.
Yeah.
So
So
now,
many chiropractors are getting into alternative methods,
mhm,
subtle healing modes, and things like this. And they're learning a lot about these things, and they're being very effective, which is why they're continuing to be able to be in business because they truly
mhm.
are helping people.
It's
But
preventative too.
chiropractic's like anything else. I'm sure there's a lot of mediocre ones out there,
Yeah.
you know, and then there's a lot of really gifted, really good ones.
Well,
Yeah,
John,
I've
we're
got
in
a
St. Louis, so Logan College is about, I don't know, 15 minutes from my house, and you
Uh
can't throw a rock without hitting a chiropractor's office around here. It's
huh.
almost as
Yeah.
bad as the car washes these
Yeah.
days.
Uh huh.
I was about to
But
say
yeah,
one of my friends is a chiropractor, and he actually just took down his signage, and he still does that, but he's focusing more on like nutritional science and cryotherapy and things like that. He's finding that
Right.
those are much more interesting, and it's it. He just feels like he's doing more good that way. I ran into him a couple weeks ago, just out and about. I was like, "Oh, what happened to your place? Your sign's down." He's like,
The
"Man, I'm
amount
going like a whole new direction."
oh yeah. And the amount they're learning about healing now is just incredible. The speed at which the learning is happening, like there are all these new modalities, new techniques for curing cancer.
Mm.
But here's the problem: a lot of these, since they're real new and a lot of them are experimental, who can afford them is rich people.
Yeah.
You know,
insurance won't cover it.
right? And what do homeless people do for health care? It's like non-existent, pretty
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we gotta do something about all that.
Yeah, for sure. We're coming up on an hour here in a little bit. Where would you give people advice? Well, I want to learn how to read tarot for myself. What
Hmm.
deck should I start with? Because I mean, it's literally limitless out there. There's probably millions of different decks you can buy.
Right. I would start with the Church of Light deck, which that goes with that book I was talking about, the Sacred Tarot, and it's called the Egyptian deck. I like that deck a lot.
Okay. And when if someone wants to start, they can start with your book.
Exactly.
Do you want them to start with the newest one, or would it be better for them to start with an older one? I mean, is
No,
it
my newest book is really geared toward people being able to study the tarot.
awesome? All right. Well, give us
So
some
that's
give
exactly, like what it's for. And then I'm also currently writing a second volume to that
okay.
because we didn't get into this, and it's probably we didn't need to really, but um, there's some new techniques I use in my book that need to be explored further or explained further, and that's why I'm writing a second volume for it.
Okay. So grab your book, The Church of Light deck, and then you can go through the book. I mean, tarot cards are super interesting. Even if you have
Oh yeah.
no interest in this whatsoever, you can buy a deck of tarot cards and you can be entertained by just trying to learn what each one means and
Oh,
stuff like
exactly.
that. It's just such a fascinating art. I mean, would you call it an
Yes,
art?
definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
Can you give us some highlights from your book? Maybe something that you want people to know that they're going to get when they purchase it?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of explanation in there about the human mind and how it's set up and how the energies in it work. And there's a lot of metaphysical concepts that are portrayed in the book and talked about. And one thing about metaphysical concepts is you can learn one, hear of one, and then you feel like you know that thing. But actually, then later you might have experiences in your life where it'll take on a deeper meaning and you'll understand more about it. So this is information that the more you go over it and the deeper you get into it, the more you get out of it and the more meaning it has for you. And I think it's very conducive to what I would call mental and spiritual health.
Mm-hmm.
It's just good for you stuff, you know.
Mm.
And sometimes I have a friend who's kind of always telling me about terrible things she hears of in the news.
Yeah.
And I say, you have to be very careful with that because it's almost like doing a diet of junk food.
Yeah.
You know, in other words, if you listen to the news and if it brings you down, which I wouldn't be surprised if it would, if it makes you feel bad, it's not good. That's not good.
My dad watches the news like 14 hours a day and just complains all the time. And I'm like, you are literally killing yourself listening to nothing but horrific stories all day. And people look at us and they're like, oh, you talk about ghosts and stuff like that. And it's like, you watch the news and the news is more brutal and worse than anything we've ever put out. So, tune out.
You guys talk about ghosts because you're trying to understand things.
That's true.
You're trying to comprehend layers of reality that are unseen most of the time, like that.
Absolutely. Hey, have you ever... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, you guys put out very good energy.
Oh, well, thank you.
I feel like you're doing good things in the world, making people aware of all this stuff.
We try, to be, I mean, we want to be open to the possibilities of what can be out there. And when it comes to the news just wants to scare you into continuing to watch. Like you have to keep watching to find out if everything's okay. Because even with, I feel like YouTube, you can do that. You can end up just watching video after video. You know, the housing market is about to crash. Tesla's doing terrible. Ford's doing terrible.
Yeah.
You can find videos about anything.
They'll have headlines in YouTube like 7 things they found in Egypt which terrify scientists.
Right.
Exactly.
Then you listen to this and you think, I think those scientists need to chill out. What's there to be afraid of,
Absolutely. Have you ever, and this is, stepping outside, have you ever been to the Sally House? That's not too far from you. Do you know, are you familiar with the Sally House?
Sally House?
Yeah. So it's a haunted house in Atchison, Kansas. And it is allegedly haunted by, it had a doctor that lived in it. And a little girl, I guess, early 1900s, maybe in late 1800s. I'm not sure when they came out with anesthesia, like general anesthesia, but she had like a ruptured pancreas, something where he had to, open her up and do surgery. And I guess he messed up on the anesthesia and it didn't work. And he kept working on her while she was awake and could feel everything. And she died and her spirit's trapped there. And she scratched people. There's some EVPs that are from that house that are absolutely horrifying. I just wondered if, what your thoughts were on it. We're planning a trip there, hopefully pretty soon, just to see what's going on there.
Well, energies like that are really intense or really traumatic or involve a lot of suffering, they can cause trapped energy.
Mm-hmm.
They can, so I wouldn't be surprised about something still being there, that sort of thing.
Man, we need to swing by your house and grab you on the way there.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Yeah. Well, listen, I probably need to go.
Sure. Would you be willing to come back on when your second book or your next book comes out and kind of go
course.
over this in detail more? It'll give us
Very
a chance
definitely.
to learn. Give us a
I'd
chance
love
to
to.
learn a little bit more about it, be a little bit better host, a little bit more knowledgeable. So,
Yeah.
we hope you like John. He seems like a really nice guy. Go out and check out his book. And if you're interested in anything with the tarot, you can check into his books, where we said. And again, please like, subscribe, share. It really helps us out. Let us know what you think at cryptiquepodcast@gmail.com. You can find our cool designs at cryptiquepodcaststore.com. And you can do a one-time donation at buymeacoffee.com/cryptiquepi. And remember, tarot is not about predicting the future, but rather about understanding the present moment and making empowered choices that shape our destiny. Good evening, Crypt Keepers.
I actually do have a final thought.
Okay.
A final question that
Mhm.
we should have asked, but didn't, so we'll have to bring it back now.
Mm.
But he talked about the one thing that's standing out to me more than the rest is the tea. That he said the tea had a bad taste. And I've seen stuff like this with like Eastern mysticism. That sometimes in the tea ceremony, the way the tea comes out can have some reflection of the person who prepared it. Or some sort of, deeper meaning. I mean, we talk about reading tea leaves. Like, tea has a history of being used for sort of divination. But it makes me wonder, with manifestations of readings that come through like that, through his tea, or ideas and thoughts that come to him when he's doing these readings, it just makes me wonder, is there just a high correlation between sort of a psychic sensitivity and people who do tarot readings, or as you get better at tarot, does the other follow?
We'll have to ask him next time.
Yeah.
I was going to say, every time I've tasted tea, it tastes nasty. So
that's why you got to put all the honey and milk in it.
Yeah, that's just me. I'm not a tea guy. I'm a Mr. Tea guy, but I pity the fool that's got to drink tea all day.
First name Mr., middle name Period.
You got it.
All right.
All right. They're probably sick of hearing us. All right. Good evening, Crypt Keepers. Tune in next time. We'll see you soon. All right.